All right, welcome everybody to this webinar with Dr. Bia Labate. I'm super excited to have you here and to talk about the Psychedelic Liberty Summit. I'm excited to see that it's now going to be a virtual event, and bummed out that all this stuff had to cancel a lot of in-person events that I was really excited for, but excited that you guys were able to move it online. So Bia, do you want to give a background about who you are and if people don't know about your work?
Yeah, okay. Just want to thank you guys for having me here and say that I have been observing the work of psychedelics today. And, Chacruna got into the scene trying to be a media vehicle. You guys were already doing this work before we started. So I just want to show my appreciation for the leadership that you have and also for welcoming me into this space and being nice colleagues and showing a good example of collaboration over competition. I very much appreciate the way you guys didn't know me and were just always so kind and generous. And, we are very honored to have this collaboration. And yeah, my name is Beatriz or Bia Labate. I'm an anthropologist. I have a PhD in anthropology from the State University of Campinas, Unicamp. I have a part-time job in MAPS, where I am public education and cultural specialist. I have two different academic affiliations in CIIS, the California Institute for Integral Studies. I'm an adjunct faculty both in the East-West Psychology program and in the Integral Transpersonal Psychology program. And I am the executive director of the Chacruna Institute for Psychedelic Plant Medicines. And this work that I'm going to talk about here is under this capacity on my work with the Chacruna Institute. I also want to say that I am Brazilian and English is not my native language. So I want to apologize in advance if I say words that are not very accurate or offensive. I have experience in the past people getting upset with things that I say when I didn't mean. I just want to, remind everybody that not all of us speak such good English, although I really like your language and I love to learn it and I'm proud to speak, I think, well, but it's still a challenge to communicate dense ideas in a foreign language.
Totally understand.
So basically, I have been dedicated to studying plant medicines, ayahuasca, peyote, and others, and ritual, religion, shamanism, drug policy. I have studied a lot traditional use of ceremonial plants or sacred plants, but also this interface with urban uses and contemporary uses. And in the Chacruna Institute, we're trying to create a bridge between ceremonial, traditional, shamanism, ritual, and religion, and this emerging field of psychedelic science, and to try to create bridges and dialogues over these areas. That's one mission. The other mission is to try to increase diversity, inclusion, access in the field of psychedelic science. So we're trying to give voices to indigenous people, women, people from the global south, queer people, and the sciences that receive less attention, which are the social sciences, especially anthropology. That's a big focus of ours. And in general, I think we share with psychedelics today the mission of trying to elevate the conversation and creating positive public education, informative, accessible, critical reflection, and trying to improve the space. And yeah, I guess that's about it in terms of my background.
It's always amazing. I look at what you do and all the hats that you wear and just really impressed about all the work that you put out and how you really navigate all that. I look at them like, how does Bia manage all that stuff and do all this work? So, and I'm excited for the collaboration. So thanks for being open to it and excited to have you here today. So let's dig in and chat about, this upcoming project that you have with the Psychedelic Liberty Summit. What is it and where did this idea come from?
Okay, so I have been doing a lot of conferences, and I recently wrote an article where I confessed that I'm a kind of conference nerd. I like conferences. one of those people that likes to go to conferences, likes to organize conferences, likes to follow conferences. Conferences are a big passion. I've been organizing conferences for 23 years, organized in several countries for the last years. And we have put out together different conferences throughout the years, in different countries. And I consider more or less a kind of foundational one that we did in the United States was in CIIS in 2018. It was called Cultural and Political Perspectives on Psychedelic Science. And in that conference, we sort of outlaid the menu of a series of topics that we consider that were not receiving proper attention in the mainstream circuit of psychedelic conferences. So everything that people like really care about and talk about in like the hallways and on parties and between them, but that don't make it to the academic journals or don't make it to the mainstream conferences. We focused on all of that. And one of the panels addressed legal issues, regulation. We also had on that conference one panel that addressed women and gender minorities and sexual diversity. So we made a conference called Women and Psychedelics. We made another one called Queering Psychedelics. We had also a panel on indigenous perspectives on plant medicine, and we have been doing conferences about those topics. And the other topic was this one of there's one panel was about people of color, and we developed a whole line of work in Chacruna about that. And this one of regulation is one of the more, the less visible. And when we did it in 2018, the same conference we had, I think it was the first conference that had a panel about the commodification of psychedelics. However, you can't really say those things lightly without, speaking out of your ass, because you need to research. But I have the impression that that was not not out there. So we launched this open science statement done by Bob Jesse and others that was kind of outlining, principles for the expansion of new psychedelic businesses, and making a claim that as this goes more mainstream, people should stick to traditional manners of cooperation in the field of psychedelics and not competition. So raising issues about patents and big pharma coming into the field and ethical standards about creation of new businesses. So related to this new commodification, there is the discussion of regulation and legalization or decriminalization. And we also had a panel about that topic. So that was in August 2018. And then we had in 2019 Queering Psychedelics. So 2020 was the time to come and tackle this one. We're trying to try, to be visionaries and be a little bit ahead of the curve and feel the topics that are hot and new that are important and bring them to the forefront. So when we started organizing, it was in March 2019, and we hadn't had Denver, we hadn't had Oakland, but we could tell that this is the next phase, because with MDMA and psilocybin coming closer to becoming prescripted medicines and approved by the FDA, this, the matter, it's not whether this is going to happen or not, but how, and what are the, how is going to be access, and how do you include other populations, and how do you reciprocate and give back to the field. And so we launched the idea and the logo and put a line up there. And then Denver happened. I think it was in June, but it was like a kind of, almost miracle, because it was like 0.5% that they made it 50% with 0.5% more. I remember that we're receiving emails like, let's join this party for, the fact that this didn't pass. And then, no, wait, it did pass, yay. And after that, we had Oakland, and now this is spreading very fast. So it's interesting, we feel the conference, it gets the spirit of times, because when we launched the idea, it was not so strong, and it was not, but then it showed to be really timely. And actually the conference becomes out of dated, because the timing of the conference is not the timing of politics. Politics go much faster and now this is spreading through different countries, the idea of different states, decriminalization. And so this is also one of the reasons that we decided not to postpone the conference, but to keep it now, because we want it to happen, to influence ballots that are going to go in the November election. And also this field is very dynamic, so things are changing fast. And this conference is very political. It's more political and less academic than others that we did. So it makes sense to keep it now. And the conference is always also related to the creation of a program that we have, that is the Council for the Protection of Sacred Plants. This is a really solid team of lawyers. The great majority are men, so we're looking for women, although I joke with them and I call it my harem because it's like 7 men. But we are also looking for other women collaborators. It's a super kick-ass top group of lawyers that have dedicated a lot of work to religious freedom and research, and some come from the world of cannabis. And so we created this group because we felt the need to create some kind of institution and more formal, entity to protect and honor sacred plants. So a lot of our focus in Chacruna is sacred plants, ayahuasca, peyote, and others. We also talk about psychedelics in general, but let's say our main brand is sacred plants, to advance religious freedom, to create knowledge about it, to create public information, to support people that have legal troubles, and to try also to envision ways of changing the current state of affairs through advocacy. So the conference is the first little baby project of the Council for the Protection of Sacred Plants. And it's also the official launch of our group.
You jumping in, Joe? I saw you unmute.
Well, that's fantastic. I remember years ago at Horizons, I watched somebody from ICEERS talk about religious advocacy and lobbying for religious freedom in the US, and I was blown away. That was like the #1 talk for me. And now to see this expand into this very large conference, essentially around similar topics or identity.
Okay, he froze too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is such a time.
I was going through all the speakers and the
you froze a little bit, Joe.
Go for it. No worries.
No, I was just going to say, since you froze, I was going to say, yeah, this does feel like a very timely event as well, with everything that's unfolding and the conversations that I see that are happening. It's like we need a place to have these conversations to really kind of get ahead of what's going on. I mean, every time I look at the news, there's something evolving, say in the business space around psychedelics, and new companies are emerging. And yeah, what does this field look like? What is it going to look like in a year, 5 years, 10 years? And what's it going to look like when, a lot of different players are coming into the scene? So yeah, I'm just really grateful that, you're keeping this and not postponing it, because, we're seeing things every day about how it's really evolving. So.
Yeah, I also feel, it's kind of amazing, like how much we love psychedelics and how much they mean things to us, and how little there is in terms of like social institutions that protect us and that serve us. And if anybody's interested in any topic, you can walk into a library, and if you're into like gardening, you have a whole shelf of things. If you're into like basketball, you have sports to consult. And the field of psychedelics, we have to build all of this. It's kind of doing from scratch, and that's why it's so exciting. And I always encourage young people, especially those wonderful millennials that put a lot of hope on us for the future, people that are in doubt whether they should follow a career in academic career or not with psychedelics, or just open new venues. And it's such a virgin topic. It's in so much need. of work. And then that's ironically becomes so much more fulfilling, because everything you do, it's like there's an immediate reaction, because there's so little done, and then that becomes a reference, easily and fast, because you're kind of like opening paths. So it's very rewarding, and I feel very blessed, and have been, the luck to devote my entire time to psychedelics. And again, this Council for the Protection of Sacred Plants is very much imbibes the spirit of what we want with this conference. So we're talking about psychedelic liberties and psychedelic rights and the access, obviously this idea of cognitive freedom and autonomy over your body. And, it's not up to the state, and our bodies is our sovereign territory, and you have the right to like program your mind and your body as you wish. That doesn't belong to the state, that belongs to you. But that's also related to profound links in social life, in traditions that are important and foundational to us as human beings for centuries or millennia. So we're very much interested in this bridge between tradition and contemporary uses, but we like to consider how psychedelics and sacred plants have played a role, teacher plants or plant medicines, however you want to call them, in creating sociability, in transmitting culture, in defining identity, in defining territory. And so the Council for the Protection of Sacred Plants want to talk about rights to access of psychedelics, but also obligations, because with all rights comes obligations. So it's not just about what we can do and, like our demands, but what we need to do as communities to do this in responsible ways. So talking about rights involve also talking about access and who have right to access this as well. There isn't a separated discussion like you have the right and then later we'll see who gets that right. Everybody has to be included in that right since the beginning. And so it's talking a lot about access and, about the pearls of commodification and ethical uses and safety and responsibilities on how we, do this in a responsible way and with safety and with community-based. And we also have a big focus on the topic of conservation and sustainability. So if we want to have rights to these plants, which plants are we using and how are we giving back to these plants? And so we have launched, for example, one video called Ayahuasca Legal Harm Reduction. That video is teaching people that are having ayahuasca underground circles to keep track of certain standards in case they are harassed by the police. They can show that they are following more or less, principles of religious freedom and responsible use, have control to the medicine, who keep track of who uses how much medicine is used. So we have done a little bit about that. And we are also just interested in knowledge and education. So we have, for example, a big legal library of all the cases that have happened with ayahuasca in different countries. And we have published a series of, we have a session on policy and how, different cases that have happened and how these outcomes have been. We have been helping some people in the US that had problems and providing them scientific information and also moral support. And, it's interesting because when you put this net out there, all kinds of fish follow into it. And only when you're in the forefront of this work, you kind of notice how needy we are, because there's so many people swimming out there trying to grab something like we get so many kinds of requests. So there's also a big, we do a lot of consulting for academics that want to do research. We do consultancy for people that are involved in advocacy. There is currently one Shipibo shaman that is in jail in California for sexual harassment. And there's a big challenge. Like there's so many things happening and it's hard to have one place to go to. And so this council is trying to launch, the conference to deal with all of these topics. And I don't know if you guys want to go into it, but I'm happy to also explore the different, subsections of our conference.
Sure. Yeah. Let's jump into it. Sounds exciting.
Yeah, I kind of feel that I am a bad person to be interviewed because I like to speak a lot. So
Totally
please
fine.
interrupt me if I go on
Well,
and on.
I did have a question. You said you guys were working on some videos or education with ayahuasca training. Is that public? Is that or like
Yeah,
can
we
people
have
see
it
that
in
somewhere?
in our site, and I can show it to you.
Okay.
I also invite people to go to Chacruna's YouTube channel. We have posted there 6 conferences from, different years. So we have all the videos from all of these 6 conferences. We have also created some short videos of some of these conferences, like 2 to 3 minute, summaries of the conferences. And we also have a series of live streams that we have done with, reporting from the ground. And this is the short video I just put on the chat that I mentioned about ayahuasca legal harm reduction.
Awesome.
It's one. We have also done a video about peyote conservation and different ways to harvest peyote, teaching people not to take the root out, but to harvest right from the floor. So anyway, the conference is going to be 2 days, 3 simultaneous tracks from like morning to evening. So if it was just once a day, it would be like 6 days. It's a real huge packed amount of content. We have around 70 speakers. We have 12 moderators. We have 35 community partners. Psychedelics today is one of our proud community partners, and I'm thankful for that. And we have, activists and researchers and community leaders. We have a lot of lawyers, but we also have different researchers. A big focus of our conference is on peyote. Peyote is the main sacrament of this land. So a lot of Americans like to fetishize South American indigenous shamanism and other cultures, and kind of forget to look at their home and their garden and talk about their own traditions. Chacruna has tried to bring Native Americans and the topic of peyote to the forefront. The topic of peyote is dense and super complicated because it's a series of conflicts of laws and of views. So there's Native American rights, there's conservation issues, there's legal issues, and it's very contentious. Some people are totally against non-indigenous people using peyote. Some people think that the only solution is to cultivate peyote. Other people think that this should be just Native American, and that non-native federally recognized tribes should not have a space. So we have the main peyote conservation institutions that exist in the US, Morning Star Conservancy, the Indigenous Peyote Conservation Initiative, and the Wisharika Research Center that also is based in Mexico. They are our community partners. Nierica from Mexico is also a community partner. We have different ethnicities. I am really excited. We have Sioux or Lakota. We have Dine or Navajo. We have Newe or Shoshone Bannock. Again, people, please forgive me for my English, and I don't know if I'm saying these names right. We have Comanche. Troy is a Comanche. We have a woman from the Ojibwe Nation. So we got a
Cool.
really diverse indigenous, and some of the speakers have never spoke on the psychedelic circuit before, and some of them have been really reluctant to join, and we have been working with them for several months on the background. And so this is the cool thing of being an anthropologist. And you say, I have all these hats is because I'm underpaid in all of them. So I need to have several jobs and to do my voluntary work. But the nice thing, you get to do awesome shit like that. Like we're not so mainstream, so we can be much more radical. We can do things that other more central based, solid, more scientific or more academics strictly cannot do. And we very much cherish that. And then we have another one of the super hot panels is about uh, commodification, or the emergence of these new psychedelic corporations. So we have this discussion about, is it okay to have a profit? How much? Should we let these big players in? Everybody feels totally overwhelmed these days. It's every day you wake up, it's a new psychedelic business, it's a new venture capitalist, a new entrepreneur, a new techie, a new this and that. And so it doesn't help to feel oppressed and suffocated and nostalgic of the times that it was just us, psychedelic researchers and lovers and enthusiasts, because the new reality of psychedelics is this. Like, some people are investing in sports. Oh, maybe I'll change and I'll invest in psychedelics. So we have a panel to talk about all of these things. We're also going to launch North Star. That's a super cool project by Liana from MAPS, and Kat Kallner. She's part of our advisory board. And they're trying to create some kind of standards and accountability for these new players as they move into the space, to talk about, ways of reciprocating and having some kind of coherence, and what is the identity that these new businesses want to have. So that's one, other of the things that I am more excited about. And then we have this super cool panel with all the main initiatives of decriminalization in the country. So we have Kevin Matthews from Denver. We have Larry Norris from Decriminalized Nature Oakland, or National Decriminalized Nature. We have Ryan Munavar from the Psilocybin Initiative in California. And we have David Bronner that is speaking on behalf of Tom Eckert and Cherie from Oregon and the Psilocybin Initiative. So we have a spectrum, of people that think we should decriminalize just psilocybin, or decriminalize all plants, or have a kind of model that is a clinic, but a clinic for well-being as well, but it's, by facilitators, moderated, in a facility. So that's the Oregon model. Then we also have another panel or presentation that is about what some people call psychedelic exceptionalism. And I believe you guys, Psychedelics, they published something with Hart. Is this correct?
An interview with Carl Hart. Yep.
Yeah, so it's a bit that perspective. That has been a classic perspective of the drug reform movement, to say, you can't just get the plants, you need to get all of these substances. And also, it is not ayahuasca or iboga or peyote, or mushrooms that are putting people of color in jail. It's all the other drugs, crack and methamphetamine and cannabis. And so if you really want to change the panorama, you need to include all drugs. And if you leave them out, it's probably going to be harder to get them in. Whereas other people say, no, that's not correct. And we should do incremental changes. And they make an example of the world of cannabis, saying first we had medical marijuana, then cannabis in general. But then some of this drug policy classic people will say, well, that's not the same case with these other drugs, because cannabis is not potentially so harmful and there's not so much stigma. So there is this whole discussion. Others will just say, hey, whatever you think, but that's not pragmatic, and we just need to find the cracks and advance where we can. And then we also have we have some discussions on what are the lessons that the world of cannabis and cannabis regulation can bring to us. So the legacies of this industry and regulation, and what can we learn with the world of psychedelics. And then we have, a part of it that is more related to like MDMA and psilocybin. So we have two colleagues from MAPS talking about the future of MDMA regulation, insurance, costs, accessibility. How is this going to play out? Conversations that are not clear for everybody. It's work in progress. MAPS also has to run and understand a lot of these things. And we have a scientist talking about psilocybin and possible regulations and thinking more, a large part of hardcore scientists, more the biomedical folks, and in more institutions like John Hopkins and others like that, have been really concerned with decriminalization and think that this might spoil and affect progresses with the FDA. And so there's a lot of technical things to understand about risk scheduling and just taking out of the lists and technicalities. So there's one discussion about that. And then there's another discussion that we have two different people from South America, Brazil, one indigenous woman that is also an expert on human rights, and the UMIAC, the indigenous, it's a kind of indigenous union of different groups that use Yahe or Ayahuasca in Colombia, talking about ethical dimensions and paradoxes of globalization and cultural appropriation. And one aspect that I wish we had included, but it's not central, is a discussion about transforming ayahuasca into a pharmaceutical medicine, because there's some people that want to have clinical trials in the US, and this idea has rubbed some indigenous people on the wrong way, and others just don't care and say, there should be space for all. If they want to make their pill and they're happy with their pill, they can do it. It's not going to take away from our use, our traditional and ceremonial use. And then we have a discussion about access and people of color, and how can we try to promote access of people of color to these medicines, and how certain medical conditions have cultural background. And I have just co-edited and published with Dr. Monica Williams a special journal edition about access, equity, and diversity in the field of psychedelics.
Awesome.
Monica is a total, awesome woman and very accomplished, and she's chair of our board. She's African American. Our board is 4 women, and then we have Brian Anderson, and we like to say that he's our token white guy, and we play with him. He's a psychiatrist, and Brian is my oldest friend in the US, and I really, owe a lot to, he's much younger than me, but I consider him a mentor in many ways. So we try to create this dialogue, it's a dialogue between North and South, a dialogue between English world and non-English world, a dialogue between scientists, researchers, and traditional people, and an attempt to give voice to more, underprivileged and disfranchised communities. We also have a panel with veterans, and this is where I feel that Chacruna can also stretch more than other institutions, because first, we're not promoting any clinical trials. Second, we don't have obligation to heal anybody. So we are more free. I don't have a license to lose. I am just an anthropologist, and I'm not a health practitioner. So we can be more, radical. And I, as a foreigner, have a little bit of challenge with this, rhetoric around vets and this nationalism, this patriotism. Of course, I know that's a very delicate area in the US, but I think it's not just about talking on how psychedelics can help heal veterans and PTSD and their trauma, which is totally true and totally necessary. I mean, with 22 deaths of veterans a day, suicides, this is like urgent. But it's about taking it to another level too. It's about thinking about the structures that created these wars in the first place, and how do psychedelics help us revisit this American industry complex and our relationship to our governments and our futures as communities, and do we want to heal veterans to throw them back into the war machine? If these veterans have been taking psychedelics, what did they learn about their combat and their experience on the field, and how have they revisited their own process of enrollment and the lies they've been told about their own, about the wars by the governments? And so we have a kind of really progressive, panel with veterans that are doing amazing work, that are working on Congress. We have a woman, Amy Rising, that I didn't know before I met her. She seems really fantastic, and she's speaking about her work. There's a lot of, because what's wonderful about vets is that they have a lot of respect, so they can really say things and people hear, because they've been there, they served, they did their job. So how can we really, team up with them, not just to change public stigma around psychedelics, which is obvious that we want, but to go deeper. And in a conference like ours, we can. And so, we have also another workshop that is kind of like thinking about like dreaming legalization models. So a post-prohibitionist world. Some folks think that legalization is bad and they rather stick with decriminalization, because decriminalization, you take off the burden, but you don't put extra regulations and controls. But others feel that that's very limited, because in fact, still a lot of things are forbidden. And we also just published an article called Myths and Realities about Decriminalization, because we feel there's been a lot of misinformation, and decriminalization has been portrayed as being able to do much more than it actually does. But anyway, so there's a kind of experiment to envision a post-prohibitionist world and think of these models. And then we also have like some community-oriented, conversations, like how to build community, how to strengthen leadership, how to be accountable, how to try to extend our networks. There's a whole other discussion that also didn't receive a lot of attention. If you think about it, it's crazy. Like, there's this boom, psychedelic renaissance, and every day a new article and a new journalist, a new podcast, a new movie, a new pop up this, pop up that, but like, what can a therapist actually do? And everything they say about the US that we make fun, when I used to make fun back in the day, because now I don't. I live in this country. But a lot of things that people say about Americans is true. Like, there's so much regulations. It's so complex. So there's state regulations, there's federal regulations, there's the legal regulations, that the regulations by boards like, the American Psychologist Association. So can a therapist legally give advice, recommend a place for people, talk to clients? And there's a lot of legal, like blurred areas. For example, you can't, before COVID, you can't like have Zoom conversations with different one set of problems. The other problem is just like, could you become liable if you give advice to, let's say you do a screening of a client and you say, all right, you're good to go, you can go drink your ayahuasca, and this person has a psychotic break or some really challenging mental health situation. Can you be held liable as a therapist because you said, you had I kind of cleared you out? So there's a lot of discussions. It's a lot of parallels with harm reduction. Let's say if a center wants to do something cool, and I'm an ayahuasca center and I want to have a medical people around me, and I will put these medical people to interview my clients and say, you can or you cannot drink ayahuasca, and you integrate your experience. So is that okay for, let's say the center is abroad and the practitioner is in the US? Can I do that? And then, well, it would be like complicated, because it's like, okay, let's make a parallel with harm reduction. This is a safe space where you can inject your own, substance, because we don't want you injecting using this little water from the street in the corner, and a dirty needle, and throwing yourself in the street. So you come here, there's a nurse. The nurse can't inject on you, but you can inject on yourself. So you're not stimulating drug use, you're not stimulating, trying to tell people to use drugs. You're doing harm reduction. What if you have that, but also you say, if you want to get the heroin, you can go around the corner and that's where you get it? Well, you can't do that, because then you're like more than doing harm reduction, and you're doing,
like giving instruction and prescribing, in a sense.
Yeah, so from, using the hat of the FDA and a more like bureaucratic view, these substances, they are toxic and they are dangerous. And the FDA is inspired in trying to keep public health. And so they want to avoid charlatans. Well, theoretically, their mission is that. I'm doing an exercise. It's an imagination exercise. Pretend to be the FDA and pretend to like not be political and pretend there is no morals and no, religious influence and any of that in all of these decisions. And that you were just defending the public health interest. So you would say, no, we're trying to avoid charlatans. We're trying to avoid people cheating each other. We're trying to avoid people selling miracles cures that don't exist. So, we have a set of rules. Those are the standards. Of course, they don't apply those standards to all medicines, but to some, like psychedelics. Anyway, on this perspective, maybe it would be not so welcome to see, have a practitioner work for a illegal center that is doing illegal things, because that's kind of stimulating. It would be like the guy that owns the harm reduction place and then offers the substance, because from this mainstream point of view, the ayahuasca or that substance is the same as all these other drugs that people think are super harmful. So anyway, there's a session, not to resolve all of it, I got carried away, but there's a session that's talking about that. And what I am just impressed is like how much is developed on the whole side of thinking, about the potentials and the clinical trials, and how little there is about all of these other things. And so that's why we're doing the conference. And we also published a few articles about that. We have another session that is talking about this new project that is also super cool, the project New Day. They're based in Santa Cruz. Ali Feducha, she also runs psychedelic support, and they're talking about psychedelics in the role of recovery. So it's this crazy situation. You have this powerful tool, it works. You've seen it, you've tried it, you like it, your friends know it, you've seen it all over, you read about it, but you can't really do anything because it's not really legal. So how can you go around? And so what they're doing is like observing groups of integration of people that have been using psychedelics as a form of recovery for drug addiction. And Danielle Negrin from the San Francisco Psychedelic Society, she has been leading one of these groups, very successful. So there's another breakout session about this. And there's also, it ends in grand finale with Deborah Small. She's an African-American activist, completely charismatic, super knowledgeable, historically engaged. And I'm super proud that we managed to get her, and she's talking, decolonize our minds. And we're also just interested in thinking on how much of all of this thinking that still guides us is legacies of colonization, and how much we're still oppressing people of color, and how much even this movement of decriminalization, despite this rhetoric of saying, this is for people of color and then you can heal yourself with medicines from your backyard, there is still an elitist element to all of this. And we are interested in bringing all of these conversations, together. And as you see, I could go on and on, but I'll stop.
There's so much there that I would love to get into. And it just reminds me on like how diverse this field is, and just like all the little nuances here. Like, something that stood out was about peyote here in America. And I remember I just stumbled across an article that some Native Americans were even trying to get peyote out of decriminalization bill. So it's like, oh, what's going on there? The respect for that medicine in those tribes. But also just like, I don't know, I keep coming back to like context around a lot of these things, right? Like there's all these different contexts from the medical world, legalization world, decriminalization, religious freedom, cognitive liberty. And, there's just all these different ways to approach psychedelics in a sense. And I guess I'm wondering, kind of you threw this out there, post-prohibition world. Like I'm wondering, you coming from Brazil and like having maybe a little bit more I guess I don't know your medicine background, if you're associated with any churches down there, or how you were involved with any possible circles down there. But like, how would you envision this post prohibition world with either legalization, decriminalization, with all these little nuances? And I know that's a tough question, and there's so much there in terms of, different context uses and whatnot, but just curious on, you're putting this together, and I wonder what some of your thoughts are about moving forward in this space.
No, I don't really, know exactly. I think it's interesting that you asked, because I was thinking here that the only aspect that I left out of my long rant about everything is ayahuasca, the topic of religious freedom and ayahuasca. And that's kind of like my main background and my main thing. So my main medicine is ayahuasca. I've been drinking ayahuasca since 1996. And I've went more than 40 times to the Amazon. I had a house in the border of Brazil and Bolivia, and I have a mountain house where I grew ayahuasca, and I have a long story with ayahuasca. So here in the US, you have this process that the DEA has offered groups a chance to file for an exemption if you want to show that you're. So this is based on the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And if you want to show that you are a legitimate group and that you have legitimate, sincere beliefs, then you should have the right to practice. Of course, that, the way to judge these religions is pretty Western centric and based on the mainstream religions and mainstream, more official monotheistic big religions like Christianity or Judaism. So the idea that you have one God, that you have one service calendar, and you wear certain uniforms, and you have a foundational book. So if you kind of follow more or less those rules, then you would be a legitimate religious expression. And then you have this process where you could file for an exemption. And we haven't seen anybody win it yet. But we know at least 2 people who have filed it. So we have one, discussion that is about that, this process of filing for a religious exemption with the DEA. And we have some lawyers that feel that this is very misguided process, that the DEA should not be in charge of doing that. We published an article in Chacruna about that. That is very critical to the very concept, and says that if you're doing that, you're kind of helping feed this system that is problematic in the first hand. I think, if you compare the medical route is one route, then the religious freedom is another route, and then decriminalization is another route. I think that for me, if you think in terms of ayahuasca and clinical trials, it doesn't make a lot of sense at all to try to make ayahuasca into a prescripted medicine and make it a pill and then spend millions of dollars, and years and years to go through this process to try to have some kind of official FDA approval. I think that, the ceremonial and the traditional use of ayahuasca and the community-based, the spiritual route makes a lot of more sense. And what we would like to do with Chacruna is help the community organize itself to be empowered and strengthened to defend their rights with this, kind of view. Okay, this excludes a bit the non-religious or the more alternative or, personal uses of other substances. But in terms of ayahuasca, I am very much, a believer that we should organize ourselves and make sure that we can defend our rights, which already exist. So it's about expanding this view of religion and including in this concept other forms of spiritual expression that are also legit. And so we have a discussion about that. And then I'm also just completely in favor of all of this decriminalization movement. And I think it's a great start. And I am completely supportive of it. I am supportive also of the decriminalization of all the substances. And there is one project in Oregon to do that, the DATRA. We have also published in Chacruna all the 6 main documents that came out with, Oregon, California, Santa Cruz, Oakland, this other one that's all drugs in California. We have in Oregon, we have also that. If you could have decriminalization of all drugs in Oregon, then that would be also super revolutionary. And I think it would also kind of like displace the decriminalization of plants only. That would become out of dated. So it's a political chess, you know, like one thing that passes, 0.5% of something in one state, boom, can crack the walls of prohibition and of the drug war. Why? Because we are tired. We, the people, are tired of this bullshit, and we know these things work, and we know these policies don't work, and the drug war is one of the most incredible unified failures of the entire, you know, if you consider all the conventions that all the countries sign up to, the drug convention is one that has more people signing into, and it's one that has been proven more widely, you know, a failure all over the globe. So why? Because there's still very strong moral dogma around the drugs. At the base of all of this is a religious, moralistic view that drugs are wrong and bad, that are unnatural, they're either, you know, criminalized, stigmatized, pathologized, considered some kind of mental disorder or problem. So I think we have to work on the cultural basis that inform the war on drugs. And that's what Chacruna is all about. So we have to stretch the argument to show that that using drugs is part of human nature. And, you know, it's a right, and it's real, and it's universal, and it's across different groups and across different centuries, across different eras. It has been steady, you know. So I feel that these things are about to change. And if you look, you know, with the whole cannabis movement, it's coming from the most imperialist country and powerful country on planet is the United States. The United States has bullied countries throughout history using drug laws to tell them what to do. And the main argument to say we can't renovate, you know, we can't change this because we signed the conventions. Hey, guess what? The US is violating the conventions. If you allow the use of cannabis is under the convention. So we are violating conventions. States are violating conventions. This is not, you know, legal under federal law, but the same country that bullied everybody else, this is happening inside here. So I feel, you know, cannabis is leading the way. And I think that sooner or later, you know, this is going to be, I think there's such a thirst for change. And that's also the success of decriminalization. That's what it's interesting about this movement, because it's kind of disorganized, decentralized, and spontaneous. In every local town, people team up, like people are waiting for an opportunity. So if you start cracking here and there, it's just going to become, you know, contagious. And we want to make this process more contagious and more viral, not to use a term that is not so, I don't know, in terms of virus and viral, but
we could use like mycelial.
Yeah, like all different ramifications. I think, to me, you know, what is really, despite all the enthusiasm, what I'm really worried about is these new psychedelic businesses that are emerging all over. And that is what I find scary, frankly.
Well, why do you find that scary?
Because I am an anthropologist that likes to, you know, have camped in the deserts and, you know, gone to the jungles, and I like my sacred plants, and you know, everything is highly ideological and pure for me. And I really believe in psychedelics as a healing tool. And it just blows my mind, you know, that some bureaucrats just say, okay, let's invest money. This is the new thing. Like, oh, I'm going to open a casino. I'm going to invest in this psilocybin retreat in Jamaica. I'm going to, you know, I'm going to invest in Formula One. No, perhaps I'm going to open a new, you know, drug lab in somewhere to, and the ethics of some of these players, you know, so this is a discussion, again, we can feel pissed off and we can feel frustrated, but it's coming, it's real, it's there, it's very dynamic. So I feel we should, as a field, organize ourselves and try to create some standards on what we consider acceptable or not in terms of this new emerging businesses. And because there is this discussion, oh, you need to be big pharma because you need to scale up. I didn't know this word, so I was looking it up. Scale up. It still doesn't make sense for me, because it's like saying, oh, okay, we want everybody to be able to drink coffee, so now we have to open a Starbucks in every little town of the world. No, you can have local clinics, that could provide for people locally. So I think a lot of the emphasis should be like stakeholder initiatives that have multiple people, that are locally owned, that are locally based, and then have ethics and standards. And then again, the commercialization and the commodification of psychedelics, the vulgarization, the bastardization is just a new reality, because you have the new psychedelic businesses, but also you guys, like, you have been doing this work for many years. You've seen what's happening in the space. The same thing that is happening on the business and the clinics and the retreats, it's happening on the cultural sphere. So now you have a bunch of people that never have nothing to do with psychedelics that will throw a psychedelic conference. There is no vision for the conference. They don't have any ties in the community. They are not researchers. They have never published anything. And what do? They get a lot of money, and they might make a trade-off show like those conferences, pair up, investors with the investors with public, and you sell a slot, you pay 5,000, you get a gig. I wrote an article for Chacruna that it was also said, it was called the new psychedelic business, emergent psychedelic business, psychedelic science conferences. And then you have like this, big money coming in, and money really, buys things. So what do we have to do? We have to organize ourselves as communities. Because if you are a researcher and you published a book and you did a research on some psychedelic, you're used to speaking on psychedelic conferences for free. Why? Because, it's a very poor field. There is no funding. People are hustling to fund, and they don't have official funding from the government. But if it's a different business, they are throwing this together. The conference costs $1,000 one day. So we have to charge them. We have to say, okay, I'll participate, but what are you giving back on return? I feel a lot of researchers are naive. They get invited, and, they land their logo, and, they say, okay, if one researchers land the logo, that's a brand and legitimacy for all of that. So how could we organize as a field so that people touch base more with each other? To say, do you think this project is legit? Should I support it or not? And I think these are the networks that we need to create. So this informal and social controls, that's what our anthropologists are all about. So this is not about a regulation. I'm gonna issue, a statement from some top-down body, and this is how everybody's gonna be now. This is really about everybody incorporating values and knowledge and sharing as a community. So what people will say, maybe some people in California don't, appreciate, your energy, and this is a gossip, like sharing information about things in our field is necessary. It's a form of control of, creating this network. So we are very much about that with practitioners.
Yeah.
And I have dedicated a lot of time to, denounce practitioners that are problematic. I was just invited to give an interview on Spain on the television about this very problematic shaman. And I said, well, somebody else should talk now, because I've been doing this for years. So calling out the people that are problematic, creating standards, creating networks, strengthening us as communities. I think I'm putting a lot of faith in North Star. I think they're going to do a good job. And then, it's part of our policy. We have 35 community partners. We gave all of them a free ticket. that's not standard policy in the field, because we really want to help create these networks. And I think we need to, if people know each other, if people are in personal contact and they hang out together, we strengthen our communities. And so the conference was supposed to have a big dimension of that, and now it's going online. Well, that's a bit sad, but we hope we can, reinvent it and recreate these networks. I think all of us are trying to figure out. I'm watching what you guys are doing. You had only podcasts, and now you have webinars too. So trying to figure out ways that we can keep connected during this crisis.
Yeah.
And maybe ironically, coronavirus is helping us, do that, because we're feeling more than ever the need to connect and to be together and to find ways to be more in touch. And, sorry that I think I was very dispersed in my answer, a bit all over the place.
No worries. I noticed that we're over an hour for like this presentation, so I want to move to question and answer. But something that you touched on, which I think might be important just to briefly ask you, and I don't know if you'll have a short answer before we get to some of the participants' questions, but I'm just thinking about some of the leaders in the space that might be watching this or people participating. Something that came up as you were speaking about conferences and new players coming on the scene, and kind of like thinking about morals and ethics and do I get involved in this? And this is something that's been coming up for me often as I'm seeing some of these conferences come up. I go, do I participate in this if they ask me, right? And it's like, I don't know if I align all the time with what they're offering, but then it's also, how do leaders in this space possibly use their voice to influence that field that doesn't know anything about it? People coming together thinking this is the next big cannabis and being, I don't know, psychedelics are much different than cannabis. And do you know what you're kind of getting yourself into to some extent? And so, you kind of said, scientists and researchers might be a little bit vulnerable. Maybe they don't know. So like, how do we approach this as a community when we're getting approached by, say, venture capitalists, people that are starting to come in with big money, that are offering these potential opportunities?
Yeah, that's very complex. I struggle with that myself. My general policy, I think, I accept a lot of invitations because I think they're going to do it anyway. And it's better that I go, because if I don't go, it's going to be worse without me. And
Right.
I want to say my voice and say my piece. So, like some mainstream TV channel wants to do a documentary about ayahuasca. And it's going to be 5 white men saying 5 stereotype things. And I already know what's going to be. And they ask me for an interview. And I can say, no, I don't want. Or I'll give my interview and I'll try to see if I make it to the final cut. I've always tried to cooperate when I can. But I do think we need to, have some boundaries. And I have just withdrawn my participation from a conference that I don't think they were showing, ethical standards. And so I said, no, this one I'm not. So we're trying to create all of these policies, same things like who can give us money? Do we take money from anybody because we convert the money into good actions? Or we say, no, thanks, thanks, but no thanks. I don't want your money. So we created a disclaimer and we said, you can give us money, baby, but you ain't telling us what to do. Like, you don't buy a slot, you don't buy a place to speak, you don't have any demands, you don't influence our content. So if you want to give money, it doesn't mean we're going to put an article of yours. It doesn't mean we're going to put your representative over there. But we will take money maybe from a company that is an emerging company. It's a case by case. I don't think there's a universal answer. To all of the issues. And then if you start to get, into the merits, it's a lot of philanthropist money. If you look on how people made those money, a lot of money come from all kinds of industries, from the oil industry, from this and that. So is this money okay? Is this money not okay? It's complicated. I think institutions have to, do a reflection and a work about all of this. But I also think that it's much easier to sit behind your computer and, be a social justice Facebook warrior. And we have a few of those in this field that just, I trash you, 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 and I trash you. I call you out, I deplatform you, I silence you. All right, great for you, but what are you doing actually to offer a unique contribution. What are you building? Do you have a project? Do you have something down in the real world, concrete, that is benefiting people? So it's a balance. We have to, do some calling out, some, limits, and others we just have to like dedicate ourselves to creating positivity, creating good things, because also we can't control everything,
Yeah.
like they're gonna do it. And so we are interested in proactive actions, things that contribute. And I think, I identify with you guys in this. You have your audience. It's awesome. You have 40,000 followers or something. You can build things, and that takes work. And
It's
so
been a lot of work for the past few years. Yeah, definitely.
you can see you guys work. You're serious. And I also don't like, I've seen you bullied as well and say, oh, those white guys. So I don't find that useful. Like, you're doing nice work. I'm gonna support you. I also think there's a lot of perversions in like this social justice idiom. I am in favor of true social justice, true uh, inclusive work. And that's definitely not trashing people that are doing serious work because of their race or something like that. So I think there's also some excesses in the field. I have been very bullied in this regard, and it's been hard for me. It's been very hard as a queer, gay, foreigner and immigrant to this country. There's a lot of hatred and a lot of anger here. And it's been a journey, and it's hard to please everybody. When we did Queer in Psychedelics, we got so much trash from like, well, you queer people think you're different, you think you're special, and what the sex has anything to do, and this is the intersectionality and the religion of hatred. And then we thought, oh wow, straight people are feeling not included. And we did a series of blurbs like, not gay, not a problem, there's a space for you in Queer and Psychedelics. Come show your alliance. A stands for ally. Come show your voice. And then we got all of this other wave. You straight people kidnapping our field, pink washing us, and now all these people coming to do a gay conference just because it's profitable. And we're like, whoa, so it's hard. It's hard to navigate, the tensions in the U.S. About all of this.
Hey, yeah, thanks for sharing all that. Joe, do you want to start fielding some questions that people are asking?
Yeah, let's
Move
jump into
Q&A.
this one here. The first one, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. So first question, and we can kind of keep it a little short. Can you talk a little about the legality of ayahuasca in terms of UDV and Santo Daime? This person states, I've read all the UDV churches in the USA are legal, but for the Santo Daime, only a few. Do you know why the difference offhand? It's okay if you don't.
Yes, I do, but it's also a little bit long, and I want to refer people to our site.
Okay.
But it was a different legal process. The US went with an injunction to the Supreme Court, and the Daime was a case in Oregon, and other groups are like following the model of Oregon. So it has a different dimension, but also, Daime has a few rights on the side as well. So it's a bit, tricky. But yes, in general, that's the situation. And then there's the exemption process that I was mentioning, and other people like Ayahuasca Healing from that Trinity Guzman and Soul Quest from Chris Young have filed exemptions, but there has been no answer so far. And other two groups that we know of are thinking of filing exemptions. They will also be participating in our conference.
Excellent.
And I'd also refer people to the interview that I did with Rob Heffernan. We talked a lot about religious freedom and some of this stuff. So definitely check that interview out that we released a few weeks ago.
And he's closely linked with Chacruna, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to invite people for our webinar that we're doing next Wednesday at 12 with the Chacruna leadership. So we're going to try to, think of ways that psychedelics can help us navigate this crisis and give a little bit more of like a kind of appetizer of the conference. That's next Wednesday on Chacruna's Facebook, 12 p.m. PTS, like San Francisco time. And we're going to explore more of these issues. I forgot to say some of that.
Great. So next question here. The material you wrote with Dr. Monica Williams, is that available anywhere in particular?
Yes, the special edition, Racial Equity and Access, it's totally open access, and it's available in the Journal of Psychedelic Studies. Monica also has a few papers in Chacruna. She has actually the most popular paper in Chacruna with 93,000 shares. It's called like how white feminists, like, you know, don't have it nice for Black African American feminists. And so she has a few articles. I recommend the session Chacruna Chronicles, Inclusion and Diversity. There's a series of papers over there about these topics.
Thank you. Next one here. I have mixed feelings about this word or phrase, but let's see how you want to comment on this. Does it feel like the corporatization of psychedelics is imminent?
Yes.
That's a huge thing to unpack.
I think we have been saying that. I think it,
but what does it
is.
mean?
I mean,
I guess I have a hard time understanding what it actually means.
There's a lot of people, you know, like in the cartoon when the eyes go like this, and then they show two sides with dollars. There's a lot of people like that that are looking to psychedelics like that. And, you know, there's new psychedelic businesses in the market. I don't follow all of it, but I know there's a lot of new emergent ones, and there's a lot of people. I meet at least once a week a new, you know, techie or venture capitalist, that's somebody that had an insight and want to, like, wow, you know, this is it. I want to create my spreadsheet, and this, you know, I have this vision for this retreat in Jamaica. And they say, have you ever tried this? No. Like, do you know that's pretty strong? Like, so yes, I think so. But then again, are we going to vilify it? What are we going to do about it? You know, we have to do things to educate and to try to do harm reduction and bring some of these players in. You know, I invite all of them to come to our conferences, free tickets, like get some culture, understand a bit, because you can also convert some of these people. You know, you can influence. People are people. If you have personal relations, if you make fun of them, if you joke with them, we're Latins. So there's also something hard for me in the US. It's very uptight at times. We like to make a lot of jokes. And so I think the humor is necessary, you know. We really need to keep up the humor in all of this and, you know, make a little bit fun of ourselves. That's a way of decentering ourselves, being less self-centered and less self-important. You know, joke with some of these guys, invite them on to the table, try to seduce them, you know, play with them and convince them. And for the very least, make them donate money to our nonprofit so we can do nice work, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And next one here. Can you name the person that's involved in North Star at all? Someone wanted you to repeat the name.
It's Kat Kauner and Liliana Giloli. I don't know how to say her last name. She's from MAPS. I believe their site, if it's not up, it will be up by the conference. They're also publishing an article on the MAPS bulletin about North Star. In my other hat, working in MAPS, again, everything here is not MAPS, it's Bia Chacruna. But in my other job in MAPS, I have been working with Brad Burge in this upcoming bulletin called Psychedelics, Commercialization and Access, and it's going to be ready soon. And they have an article over there, and also Bennett Zellner and, you know, Greg Kearns and Victoria Hawley, a bunch of really good authors. There's a new panel that we added also about ketamine and paradoxes, promises, profit, hopes, fake hopes of the whole ketamine industry. That's a huge topic that I didn't mention much. I don't know a lot about ketamine. I know less about ketamine than I know about other substances, but I know you guys follow a lot that discourse as well. I've been reading your stuff.
Great, thank you for that. So let's see, we can't all be doing the same thing. So what positive actions and activities can we as individuals take such as, you know, Chacruna and Psychedelics Today are doing? Is there any kind of things you suggest individual activists do or check out?
Well, that's a part kind of pretty,
It's
big
big.
question. It depends on what are your, what is your background and what can you do from your own area of expertise. And I think one of the main things that I always tell when I give lectures about ayahuasca, I want to say in the end, does anybody that doesn't have a question about cultural appropriation and how we're damaging indigenous people want to make a question right now? Because everybody always asks that question and everybody wants me to give some, answer on what can we do to help the globalization of ayahuasca and how can we do better. And like, that's what kind of everybody wants to talk about all the time. And it's a hard one, how can we help? It's the ship has sailed, the genie is out of the bottle. It's every week a new celebrity, every week a new dumb show in Hollywood about ayahuasca. It's so widespread. So what can we do? I say, you can talk to locals, you can ask the people that are involved what they can do. You can learn about the culture, you can read anthropology. When you want to be inclusive of indigenous people and of other people in the conversation, you should ask, what is there for them in this? Or is this just to fulfill my own need to feel that I'm not excluding them, but what is it actually that I'm bringing to them? So create research projects that are collaborative, be mindful of which place you go drink your ayahuasca, support plantation of ayahuasca, include indigenous people when you talk about indigenous people. Support nonprofit organizations that work with indigenous people, with environmental things, with plant medicines. So I think it's a lot about decentering on our own needs and trying to see, the people that are in the field, what do they need? I also get so frustrated with philanthropists that have ideas to do things, and they tell us, you should do that. I think they should ask, how can we better help you do the work you're doing? What do you need, darling? Like, what do you need from me? How can I support you? I want to create something super powerful and inclusive and democratic. So I'm going to tell you how to do this and that. It's like, well, we're doing a lot of things. So look at the people that are working and see how you can be of help. Ask questions. Ask what they're doing, what they need, how you can support.
That's a better question. Yeah, like I have folks come up to me, you should do this. And it's like, well, I'm already like barely getting by. 2 or 3 bad incidents away from panic attacks at times because I'm working so hard on this project. So totally sympathize with your sentiment there. So next,
make your conference free. Make your conference free because we have a crisis. Well, why don't you say, I am offering my service for free? Like, see what you, instead of telling others what they can do, like what are you doing? What can you do? What can you offer? What is your volunteer work, Because volunteer work is that. You don't get paid. I don't get a salary from Chacruna. We have only a part-time person that is a contractor based in Mexico. We don't have anybody employed in Chacruna. We're volunteers. So want to help? First thing, volunteer your time.
Absolutely. So this one here is really cool. We did an interview with the River Styx Foundation a while back about peyote harvesting and farming and whatnot. And this is kind of in that vein. So should the discussion of sustainable peyote harvest even be discussed when only Native Americans are allowed to harvest, despite the decrim movement?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll start there.
Yes.
Yes.
Answer
People are
yes.
going to do it anyway. People are going to inject
it's
needles.
Like this. Oh, should we talk about, drug use when drug is illegal?
Right. Yes.
Should we talk about teenager sex, doing sex when you're not supposed to be doing sex at certain ages?
Mm-hmm.
Of course. I mean, you need to have education. It's not because it's illegal that people are not doing. That's the opposite. You should more and more talk about education and provide information if these things are illegal, because if they are illegal, there's a stigma and a lack of like proper channels for conversation. And so I have slept and camped in the desert in Mexico a few times. One of the most blissful things to do on the entire planet Earth. It's heartbreaking. You go there, people damage peyote all the time. There's so many people harvesting peyote in Mexico. There's people that sell for the Native American church. There's people that sell for modern teepees or other kinds of circuits. There's people that are peyote collectors. There's people that collect peyote in general, or cactus in general. That's a big thing, collector of cactus. There's people that do the pomadas, the gels, the ointments. You know, there's tourists, there's hippies, there's new agers. There's all kinds of people. They are all collecting peyote. In the Rio Grande, in Texas and beyond, it's just not federally recognized people that have been using peyote. It's federally recognized, non-federally recognized, mestizo, and non-indigenous people have been using peyote. So yes, of course we have to talk about it. We have a video with Dr. Martin Terry talking about the conservation of peyote. This video has more than 50,000 views. If 5 peyote buttons have been saved out of the 50,000 views, my video is paid off and I am happy, because each peyote takes a long lifetime to grow. In maybe, 10, 12, 30 years to make a full family. It's completely vanishing. It's disappearing. It's a mathematical question. There's more mouth to eat peyote than peyote's natural ability to regenerate. So there's a peyote shortage. There's a peyote crisis. People are selling buttons this small, A peyote button in the floor in Texas is like a gold coin. You see it, whoop, you get it. You disappear. It's not there. People are going more and more far away to hunt peyote. It's harder and harder to get. So yes, of course we have to talk about it. The dealers don't harvest properly. The peyoteros don't, the pickers. Yes, it's totally important to talk about all of these questions. And we're going to talk about it in Psychedelic Liberty Summit.
Great. Yeah, and it's not just harvesting, right? There's climate change happening, various UV things, tons of development of the land. So like homes and malls and roads and whatnot are destroying the natural habitat as well. So it's a really complicated issue, but we need to unpack it and understand it better.
Totally. Thank you for saying that. Mining, monoculture, root plowing, land development. It's a model of development. The same thing with ayahuasca. You can have people get ayahuasca and get vines. That's one scale. The Amazon being turned down by the minute is another scale, because the vines get turned down, turned apart as well. So it's a whole developmental model that is affecting these medicines. And peyote is hard to grow and takes longer. So it's among the more, and it's already listed, as vulnerable, both in like national laws and international laws. It's very delicate.
Cool. So I guess now is a good time to transition. I would love to answer everybody's questions, but let's transition to talking about your conference and the special promo code that we have. People can sign up at chacruna.net. There's a pop-up that comes up, right? That'll say Psychedelic Liberty Summit. And you can
It's right on the first page. I don't know if the pop-up is still there, but it's
okay.
You click on there's a call for the webinar and for the conference in the chacruna.net.
Yeah, and you can use our promo code Psychedelics today at checkout for 10% off if you want to do that.
Yeah, great. I'm really excited about it. It looks like just listening to all the abstracts of the talks and people's backgrounds was blowing me away. It was so many people and so many talks. It's like really, really an incredible collection of people you put together, you and your team put together. Yeah, I'm sure it's a crazy amount of work. I can only imagine. Running a podcast is enough. So
yeah, we're very devastated when we, saw all of this happening. But hey, as they say, you got to make the best lemons with the best lemonade with the lemons you have. So we completely revisited, and we're seeing on the positive. Now we can have people from different places that couldn't come before. We can have a wider audience. We can have people from the global south. And, we reduced the price. It was $200. We made it $100. We offered full refunds for everybody who doesn't want to participate, or, told people if they want to keep their original tickets. And yeah, we're wanting to make the best. We feel people need connection, and that's the new reality. And we're just reminded of how fragile we are as a species, and
Yeah.
psychedelics have always shown us that there's different realities, and there's like invisible worlds, and have made us question all our values in terms of self and ego and time and space and death and infinity. And now we are faced with this foundational topic of death and imminent the and this plague that has historically happened in other phases. And it just make us deeply philosophical and existential about our limitations, the limitations of our body, the limitations of our knowledge, the limitations of our paradigms. And I want to believe that our resilience as people that take psychedelics and have dream of other utopias and other futures and other realities, that we're going to make it through this time, and we're going to revisit it. We're going to keep the good humor, the good mood, keep our communities, keep our connections, keep on tuned, and yeah, be united online. And I hope you guys keep on leading your way, and we can support you. And I think the big challenge is how we're going to transition to this communities online. Looking for your leadership in that. I hope we wanted to create some kind of group, like a follow-up group of the conference, but I didn't want it to be on Facebook. So some people have suggested Reddit, and kind of dreaming of a millennial with a revolutionary idea. A friend of mine was into this Mastodon thing, and he wanted us to have a thing in Mastodon. And so I'm very bad with technology, and I have a kind of fetish for these millennials that know these native digitals. I think what I want to find out is, can we create some kind of group out of this conference and out of this movement that would follow up? That's something we're trying to research in this last month that we have had, or 20 days or so.
We've used Slack in the past for stuff like that. For a conference that we hosted, we ended up creating a Slack channel and tried to move it forward. So that was fun. Sometimes it kind of slowed down communication, but hopefully we'll revisit it at some point. But that might be a tool too to explore. Awesome. Well, I noticed that we're at time, so I just want to thank you so much for your time. And if there's anything else that you just want to put out there for folks, any last words, or you want to direct people to your website again, just want to give you that opportunity. And just a huge thank you for joining us and sharing all your wisdom with everybody.
Yeah, thank you guys too. As I say, I am stepping into gringo territory by being a foreigner, and I am doing the invasion of a foreign territory like Americans go to South America. I am a new person in this land. I thank you for welcoming me to your land, and I want to make new friends. And we have a lot of outsiders, foreigners sometimes have a lot of prejudices against the US, and I'm learning to revisit those things and find the wonderful things that exist in the US. I feel so incredibly blessed. I just want to thank the psychedelic community and these friends and allies for all the incredible things. And I think also we can't forget that we're still very privileged to be in the US. The situation in Brazil right now is horrible. Our president is been elected the one that is more alienated and out of tone and out of touch from the whole pandemic. And even with the current administration and all the problems, we're still incredibly, privileged in terms of being in the US and facing all of this from being here. And my parents are older. They live in São Paulo. I am very concerned about them. The situation in Brazil is probably going to go very bad. People are expecting thousands and thousands of deaths. So I just, I want to thank, the opportunity to be an immigrant here. I have gotten a green card, and I have gotten a new community. Awesome. I'm looking to have more friends and more community. And, if you want to join our project as volunteers, please do. We are also looking for sponsors and donations. Chacruna is not sustainable. It's still paid a lot by our own money. So my final say is like, if you want to help this movement, go study business administration or something, because we have a lot of lovers and plant lovers and therapists and masseuses, and we need some people that have their heart in the right places and the good capacity you know, to help bring money for our good initiatives. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Labate, thank you again. Really appreciate your time, and I know everybody else has really appreciated it too. And until next time, yeah, let's keep the conversation going and keep the collaborations going. And really appreciate the work that you're doing with Chacruna and everything. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.